They say wolves don't howl in Scotland anymore. That the last wild one was hunted down in the 1600s, trapped, shot, skinned like proof. But what if it didn't end there? What if it evolved? This isn't about fairy tales. There's no enchanted forest, no teenage transformations, no Hollywood full moons. This is about something older. Bloodlines that thinned, but never vanished. This is about families that locked their doors at night, not because they feared the woods, but because they feared themselves. In certain glens, forgotten places where moss grows thicker than memory, there are families with strange traditions. Never cut your nails after dusk, never bury your dead facing east, and never, ever whistle after dark. Folklorists thought it was superstition. Historians called it rural myth, but the death records said otherwise. Between 1856 and 1901, a 27-mile stretch between Glen Lyon and Ben Hope logged over 30 unexplained mutilation cases, mostly livestock, but not all. In every case, no known predator tracks, no sign of forced entry, and the victim's throat torn, not cut. One witness whose name was scrubbed from public records said this: "I saw her eyes change. Just for a moment, then the howling started." The authorities dismissed it as hysteria. But, if that was true, why was the entire McRae family quietly relocated in 1892? Why did the minister burn their home and salt the land? You see, in Scotland, when the church salts the ground, it's not to keep spirits away. It's to keep something inside. This is where our story begins. Not in a fairy tale, not in Europe, but right here. In the blood-soaked moss of the Highlands, and trust me, you hear howling near Loch Moidart. Don't look out the window, it's in the blood, it always was. There's a glen not found on most tourist maps. Locals call it Glen Caumnodda, Glen of the Bound, not bound as in tied, bound as in warded, protected, sealed. It sits between two high ridges, just north of Loch Shiel, a place once home to the McInnes-Lena family that quietly left the land in the winter of 1879 after a long string of stillbirths, strange illnesses, and a fire that no one would talk about, a fire that didn't spread, but burned straight down into the earth. The glen is surrounded by 6 iron standing stones, each driven deep into the rock and ringed with rows of salt-fused heather. Hikers say they feel nauseous walking through it. Dogs whimper when the path curves near the ring. One forestry worker in 1994 reported seeing symbols carved into the inside of the stones, runes of binding, containment, and sacrifice. The Forestry Commission cleared the path, but they didn't move the stones. Then there's the case of Lorna McInnes, 27-year-old PhD student in anthropology who returned to her family's lost land in 2013. She planned to document local folklore for her thesis. She pitched her tent just outside the iron ring. She never came out. Hikers found the camp a week later, tent untouched, phone still charging from a solar pack. Journal water damaged but intact, the last legible entry: "The howling started last night. It's not foxes, they're too deliberate. Something walked around the camp at 2:37 a.m. I could hear its claws on the rocks." One more note was scribbled in the margin in a shaking hand. "I think it's trying to remember how to be human." No body, no blood, no tracks, but nearby, deep in the heather, searchers found the imprint of hands and knees, not crawling, waiting. Her disappearance was ruled misadventure. Closed quietly, no press, but her cousin, who still lives in Fort William, claims to have heard her voice, not on the phone, not in dreams, in the woods behind his house. He says he followed it once, just once, and what he saw, it was her face, but the rest, all fur, all wrong. She didn't blink. He stopped talking about it after that, refused to give another interview. Moved out the following spring. Some say she's still out there, bound to the glen, not dead, just different. She's learning to walk again, just not on 2 legs. There's a small ruin outside Dunning, Perthshire. All that remains is the chancel arch of an ancient kirk, half swallowed by bramble and lichen. The foundation stones are cracked, the walls are scorched, and beneath the altar lies a door. Locals call it the sealed ossuary. Most think it's just a name, but parish records from 1812 confirm a lower chamber exists. and it was sealed with iron-shod stone and holy ash. The reason why is buried in a series of journals kept by Reverend Ewan Stroud, the last minister of the kirk. His final entries, written in spidery, frantic script, describe something. Off the ground beneath the pulpit, vibrates when I speak the benediction. As if the word stirs something sleeping, I hear scratching. During the dawn prayers, not rats, no pest would dare stay this long. Mrs. Calder's boy found a tooth in the larder wall. Too large for dog or cow, still slick, still warm. In March of 1891, an Easter storm tore across Perthshire. Lightning struck the kirk. Witnesses described a howl from underground as the bell tower collapsed. Not wind, not stone, a voice, a beast, a cry of freedom. What emerged wasn't seen, but what followed. In the days after, sheep were found torn apart and strewn across the fields, but not eaten, just dismembered, as if whatever escaped was learning to kill again. A search party combed the area. They found the churchyard disturbed, some graves split open from the inside, and at the edge of the woods, a body, not fresh, not old, somewhere in between, long limbs, elongated jaw, but wearing remnants of a priest's collar. Reverend Stroud was never seen again. A bishop was called in. They the ossuary, with blessed mortar, silver shavings, and verses from the book of Job, etched into the lintel. The crypt was buried under rubble. The land was sold as unwebbable. But there's a warning carved into the stone above the ruin's entryway. Faded, but visible in certain light. Here sleeps the mouth of the bloodline. If it hungers again, let no man speak. In 2019, a YouTube explorer tried to film inside. His footage cut out after 90 seconds, the final frame. A wall of stone, pulsing slightly, and a scratch mark growing. It still knows the hymns, but it sings in hunger. They were called Clan Anfowl, the children of the wolf, a name whispered, not spoken, not because it was feared, but because it was protected. Their territory sat on the northern slopes of Bean Domnail, a wind-scarred hill on the Isle of Lewis where nothing grows but heather and silence. The clan were isolationists, reclusive even by Highland standards. They lived without fire after sundown, buried their dead upright, never married outside their blood. And once a year, under the final moon of winter, they howled, together. All of them, every voice, every generation, one howl. Historians said it was a pagan tradition. Anthropologists called it ritualized mourning. But one man called it something else. A leash. That man was Padraig MacTiernan, a folklorist and linguist who embedded with the clan in 1911. He was the first outsider welcomed in, and the last. His journals, recovered years later from a sea-erect satchel, contain notes that start as anthropology and end in dread. Their eyes reflect firelight even when none is burning. They say the hill feeds them when the deer grow scarce. I asked what that meant. They laughed. I saw a boy with a scar shaped like a crescent, not carved, but born. It pulsed when the wind howled. One entry simply reads, "They change. Not all at once, not all alike, but it's there. In the voice, in the bones." Then the final entry, "Someone broke the vow. They howled twice this year. The elder bled from the ears." After that, the journals end. By the time a relief party reached the clan's village in 1913, it was empty. No bodies, no blood, no signs of struggle, just claw marks on every doorframe, like something had fought to stay out. Not get in. A single message was carved into the altar stone of their gathering hall. We are not cursed. We are bound, and now the leash is broken. Some believe the entire clan migrated, returning to the mainland, hiding again in bloodlines and rural silence. Others think they didn't leave, that they scattered, took to the moors, changed under moonlight, but stayed under human skin until the call returns. But one thing is known, on the night of the broken howl, every dog on Lewis went mad. They say even now, if you sleep on the hill with your ears uncovered, you'll hear it. Not a howl, a second one, the one that should never have been spoken. One howl binds the blood, two breaks it. In the winter of 1984, 7-year-old Callum Brodie vanished while visiting his grandparents' farm near Loch Ilt. It was mid-December. A light snow had begun to fall. Callum had gone out to feed the hens before dusk. He never came back. The police were called, Dogs brought in. A search party combed the area for 3 straight days. No tracks, no signs of struggle, no blood. On the 4th day, the snow turned to sleet, and that's when Callum came home, or so they thought. He walked in through the front door, clothes torn, barefoot, shivering but alive, not crying, not speaking, just watching. At first, the family thought he was in shock, but his mother knew. She would say, later, "It looked like my boy, but it smelled like the woods." A medical exam showed no bruises, no signs of trauma, but Callum wouldn't speak. He wouldn't eat anything but raw meat. He flinched at crosses, slept on the floor, refused to make eye contact, and then the scratching began, every night, from inside his room, not the floor, not the bed, the ceiling. When his father finally climbed up to the attic, he found claw marks in the beams, fresh ones, and the boy, smiling for the first time, teeth too sharp, eyes too still. A priest was called. He didn't make it past the hallway, said the house felt off, cold, but not from weather, from within. Callum was eventually admitted for observation to a private clinic in Edinburgh. 3 days later, he vanished from his locked room, security footage corrupted, only one frame remained, a still image of the boy, hunched in the corner, watching the camera, one hand on the wall, the other on the ceiling. He was never found, but 1 year later, in that same farmhouse, a sheep was slaughtered in the yard, gutted, left untouched. The family moved away. But when the next tenants moved in, their daughter began drawing pictures of a boy in the attic. Not her brother, not a ghost, he's lost, she said, but he remembers what it felt like to run. I remember the snow. I remember the bones. In 1943, amidst the blackout nights of wartime Britain, the town of Invergorry in Angus reported a series of livestock mutilations so precise they were thought to be human. Limbs severed, organs removed, no signs of struggle, no scavenger interference. The War Office dismissed it. Hysteria, sabotage, panic, until it wasn't just sheep, until 2 children disappeared. And that's when they called Elias Ward. No rank, no uniform, just a letter from Churchill's office, marked Private Containment, D-Class, Asset Handler. Locals described him as polite, quiet, deeply tired, a man with a silver walking cane and eyes that never blinked at the sky. He stayed in a stone cottage near the edge of the woods, set traps no one had ever seen before, runes etched into silver wire, arranged in circles around cattle pens, slept during the day, walked the hills at night, and every full moon. He disappeared, until one night, just after the November frost, a villager heard a sound from the woods, not a growl, a fight. When dawn broke, the trees near the far glade were splashed red. Something had been dragged, large, heavy, bits of fur and human flesh were found scattered like confetti. Elias returned that morning, limping, coat shredded, cane missing. He said only one thing to the sheriff before collapsing. It wasn't the first, but it's the last. He stayed bedridden for 3 days, then left as quietly as he came. But he left behind a journal, a field guide, of sorts. Its contents are terrifying in how specific they are. Only the old ones feed for pleasure, they remember. Blood, not faces. Silver wounds don't heal, but they learn to wear pain. And then, I carry it to the urge, the second voice, but I made a pact. I hunt what I could become. It ends with a hand-drawn sigil, a circle split by a fang and a blade. Some believe Elias was the last in a secret order, men born of the bloodline, but sworn to keep it leashed. Others think he wasn't hunting monsters. He was culling the family. There's a stone in the Invergorry cemetery with no name, just a phrase carved in Gaelic. I knew what I was. I chose who I'd be. Locals still placed silver pennies on it. Not for good luck, as payment, because every few decades, something stirs in those woods again, and they hope that pact still holds. I made a promise to the moon that I would not answer. The stories haven't stopped. They've just changed their clothes. No more parchment journals. No more priests with trembling hands. Now it's Reddit posts, late-night phone calls to local radio, YouTube clips removed for disturbing content. But the details, unchanged figures that run too fast on 2 legs, eyeshine in dashcam footage, Teeth found in places where nothing should have been hunting. All across Scotland, the pattern persists. Whispers that the line never died. It just went silent. In 2021, a rescue worker named Alison Kay filed a report after a call-out near the Cairngorms. A hiker had gone missing, standard search, but she noted something strange. The dogs refused to track. One lay down and started whining. The other pissed itself. She pushed forward on foot, found shredded clothing, blood in the moss, no body, but there, in the muck, a footprint, human heel, wolf toes. The report was redacted. Kay was reassigned. In 2023, a drone surveyor captured thermal footage near the Isle of Skye. What appeared to be 3 heat signatures on 2 legs, moving across open moor at speeds exceeding 30 miles per hour. No official explanation. The footage disappeared, but one frame leaked. The file name, Whitefang 3, RD Echo, moved in early 2025. Hikers near Loch Edive reported hearing distant howling, not animals, voices, human voices, in unison. Like a choir, one said, but it didn't end. It just faded into the bones of the hill. This isn't about if they exist, this is about what happens when they remember. Bloodlines fade, but instinct does not. And in places where the land never forgot the pact, where churches burned and glens still howl without wind, the children of the wolf still walk, not cursed, not dead, waiting. So, if you find yourself alone in the highlands, if you hear a second howl after the first one dies, don't run, it's already too late, just pray. It still remembers what it was. They were never legends. They were ancestors, and for those who hunger for more, step deeper into the shadows. With our ultimate werewolf horror playlist linked in the description below, in the world of horror, the scariest things happen when you least expect them, and trust me, you don't want to be left in the dark. Welcome to the darkness.